So when those glazes have dried completely, that's the time to then get rid of all the pencil lines. I've removed the pencil lines, so we're ready to carry on with the next glaze. I'm going to carry on with the same colours as before because we're just going to beef these up. I might just add a little bit more pink to one of the glazes, but we're going to go do the dark grape now because that's the most difficult, if you like. So we added the French ultramarine to our mix. I'm just going to liven it up because sometimes when you're waiting for paints to dry, the paint can dry on the palette as well, so I'm just going to make those nice and wet. So I'm going to lay another glaze of water over the top of this grape. Won't make it quite so soggy because the water will have a little bit of memory from being wet before, so we won't need to do another glaze over the top, just one single glaze. Be very careful that you match the glaze edges up so that you don't end up with double edges. Hoover up the excess water and then pick as much paint up as you can onto your brush, and then looking at the grape very carefully drop the paint into the darker areas. You'll find that the paint will spread quite a lot. This is the beauty of artist watercolours. They do spread very nicely into wet washes, but we can keep them under control by not putting too much paint onto the paper. Just drop them where you see the red, where you see the dark colour. This is why I like to have the subject right next door to me, because then you can actually see what it is you need to paint. Just going to sweep a little bit down there, but not take it under there. There's some lovely reflected light down there. Once the glaze is on the areas that you'd like it to be, you can actually intensify some areas by dropping a little bit more colour into them as they're settling. This can only be done really when the paint is very wet. It just gives a little bit more pigment to the darker areas. Just a little stop now just to double check where the highlights are, and we've lost a couple here, so I'm just going to push the brush hard against the paper. This is a clean damp brush, and just sweep out some light. Keep cleaning the brush each time because otherwise you pick up the paint and put it back where you've just taken it off. Just very gently now with the tip of the brush, just guide the paint where you want it to go. Don't interfere with these glazes too much because they can actually get interfered with too much, and then all the paint will end up on the outside edge of the grape, which is not where you want them. So when you're happy with how the paint is spread, leave it well alone so that it can dry. So coming back to the first grape, we're going to do another glaze over that and add some pink to that. So very quickly, a nice quick glaze of water over the top of that. If you've made any wobbly edges in the first place, now's the time to tidy them up. So really get the accurate shape of the grape as best you can with this next glaze. So a little bit of water there, there's a little bump there which I'll get rid of. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that permanent rose just on its own. And I'm just going to drop that on across the top here. Very, very light with the brush. And then I'm going to pick up the darker colour that I used on the other grape and put that on the far end there. So I'm not having to push the brush too hard, I'm just sort of pointing it to the area and then just dropping it down, and the paint's literally being pulled off the brush by the water on the paper. Just a little bit down this side, very gently with the tip of the brush, and a little bit more darkness on this side. All the time the glaze is wet is the time that you can drop the colour in. Once it starts to dry and leave brush marks, that's when you stop painting, and then you can let it dry and carry on again with another glaze. Just going to drop a little bit more pink through here. There's another colour as well that you could use, which is quinacridone red. That's quite a nice colour for berries or grapes or anything like that, fruity colours, because it's a lovely berry red, which gives you a little bit of the idea of the glow from within. It's just starting to dry now, so at this stage just do the last little flicks of colour. Soften anything in that's not softening. We let these two dry now and come back to them in just a minute. Okay, we're ready to put a little bit more depth into these grapes now, so we're going to mix some colours to make some shadows. I've cleaned my palette, so I'm going to just quickly mix up French ultramarine with cadmium yellow pale. This will make a lovely rich olivey green, and then I'm going to add to that the alizarin crimson. Just a little bit more French ultramarine and a little bit more yellow. What I'm looking to get is a very nice dark grape colour, but with a little bit of warmth in there. As the grapes sit next to one another, they have this lovely colour bouncing between them. So I'm happy with that colour, so I'm going to just glaze over the grape once again, the whole area. Very careful now that you make the glazes match. So use the tip of your brush to get all the way around your edges. Pick up your colour, really fill the brush. Give your brush a little twiddle as you pick the colour up. And I'm going to take quite a strong shape right the way across this end of the grape. A straight line right down here with the shadow cast from the other grapes. So it's quite a good idea to have a strong light across the subject because it does add more drama to it. I normally work with a very strong halogen light, about 50 watts, and that gives me lovely dramatic shadows. And then I'm going to drop a little bit more of this colour on the far end here where it gets very dark. Again, the reason for using the glaze is so that each time I put the colour on I get this lovely soft natural edge to it. A little bit more dark colour under here, smaller amounts so it can work within the pattern of the grape. Clean, almost virtually dry brush here. I'm twiddling it on the cloth to make sure it's virtually dry, and just sweep down that edge. This really just stops all the little spider shapes of the paint as it's crawling across the grape from spreading too far. It gives us a nice sharp clean shadow. Gently flatten the brush so that you can just soften around the marks. If they're not spreading how you like them, you can just very gently tease the edges of them just to get them to soften in. When you're happy with that, if it's still damp, you can still add some more colour where it gets very dark right in the centre. So just be very gentle and put the colour on as lightly as possible so that it keeps softening into that grape. Okay, let that one dry. I'm going to mix a warmer colour now for the top grape. I'm going to use cadmium yellow pale, with a little bit of cadmium red deep, to make a nice sort of orangey colour. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the Windsor blue green shade. You can mix a myriad of colours with just a few simple primary colours. And this, if I add a little bit of water to that, is just the colour I need for the bottom of this grape. I'm going to put this wet on dry. This is very important so that the colour stays as dark as possible. And just put that on very gently on this side of the grape. Just use the tip of the brush just to get a nice clean edge at the base. I'm going to go around where the stem's going to join the grape. And when I've got enough colour on that corner, just clean my brush, take most of the water out, and then just catch that edge to soften that colour into the body of the grape. I'm going to use some of the darker colour that I mixed for the other grape for the shadow colour, and just put a little bit more of that at the top here. Again, wet on dry. It's a small amount of dark colour just to get it really nice and deep across the top there. This will also make the highlights a little bit brighter. Clean the brush, take the excess water out of the brush, and just catch around that edge to soften it in. I usually soften everything that I put on because the water and the brush usually make a very nice natural edge to any patterning or colour areas. Okay, when you're happy with that, then let it dry. Okay, so we'll just map in the stem now. I'm going to mix a bright green and then add some red to it. So cadmium yellow pale, Windsor blue green shade, mix those together, you get a lovely lively green, and then I'm going to add some cadmium red deep, which will make it a nice sort of murky olivey brown, which is just what we need for our stem. A very quick flick of water down the stem. This is where these brushes are lovely because you can get a lovely point to them. So just a little quick sweep of water and drop that lovely olivey colour onto there. Should go on very nicely because you've just put a little bit of water for it to travel and follow through. Once you've got that colour onto that stem, then you can take some of the red that we mixed up earlier for the shadow and just sweep that along the edge there. I like to try and use the colours from the grapes because then they're all related to one another and it makes a nice picture at the end. So a little sweep of that, and while it's still damp you can just dot that colour on just to give a nice little bit of drama to the stalk there. Make sure that you finish it right against the edge of that grape. So we're nearly there now. I'm going to put some light on and some more bloom and a little bit more dark into the shadows. We've got indigo here. Now be very careful using indigo. It's a very exciting colour, but it's also quite dark and also very bluey. So I'm going to make a nice little puddle of indigo. My rule with indigo is always never to use it on the first wash because it will stain the paper blue and you don't want that. So I'm going to mix indigo and cadmium red deep. These make a fantastically dark aubergine colour. And add to that a little tiny bit of cadmium yellow pale and you've almost got the darkest colour you can mix. And then I'm also going to have a little puddle of titanium white. Now occasionally people say to me, why using titanium white? But it does work for the bloom on grapes. It's a nice little addition to have. So first off I'm going to add a little bit of dark to the darker grape. Be quite sparing with this colour. Just going to put a little bit here and a little bit towards the edge. This is wet on dry. Let's put a small amount on and just soften around to blend it in. You can also use this colour to give your stem just a nice little bit of darkness to one side. While that's drying we can get the titanium white on. Pick up the titanium white without too much water. You want a sort of gloopy mix and this is going to be like a dry brush, so you do need to flatten the brush out against the palette, separating the hairs. And very gently just brush that on where you see the bloom. It'll be subtle to start with, but then it'll get better as the more you put on, and you can put on as little or as much as you like. When you're putting it on, you've got to put it on in a sort of soft, gentle movement, almost like you were dusting fairy wings. It's a very light touch. And try and move the brush around so that you don't get the same brush marks time and time again. This is great that if you've gone dark somewhere for the bloom and missed a little bit, you can just cover that over. As I say, it does fade, but it also does bring up the lovely pale blue dustiness of that colour. So just keep building it on until you feel like you've got enough on the grape to give that impression. We only need a little bit on the top grape just to give it a little bit of dryness on the top there. You can see I'm barely touching the paper. It's the texture of the paper really that's creating the pattern, and you're just lightly brushing it on. Sometimes you can just dab it with your fingertip as well, just to flatten it out. Okay, when you think you've got enough on, you're ready to do the other grapes. I'm going to paint in the rest of the bunch using the same techniques. So there we have the finished painting, and you can add as little or as much detail as you like.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.